How can we avoid financial underpreparedness? Well, talking about it is a great place to start, and we're going to learn how to do that in today's episode. Welcome to Money Talk with Skyler Fleming, where your money makes dollars and cents. Let's get talking. Welcome to today's episode of Money Talk with Skyler Fleming. We'll be discussing the importance of family conversations when it comes to financial planning. Our guest, Andrew Van Alstyne, shares his insights on how open discussions can prevent underpreparedness when it comes to our finances. We're also going to talk about the role of family in wealth management, the benefits of intergenerational wealth transfer, and how to overcome the tension of talking about money with families with difficult financial histories. The money talking points for today's episode are: what was your first money memory? 2. What are the benefits of transferring wealth to the younger generation before someone passes? And 3. How can families overcome the tension of discussing money, especially when there's a difficult financial history? With the money talking points in mind, let's get right into today's episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's interview on Money Talk with Skyler Fleming. Joining me today, I have Andrew Van Alstyne. And we're talking today about family conversations and financial underpreparedness. And this is a conversation that stemmed from me reading and learning a little bit more about Andrew. So I'm excited to talk about this one today. But Andrew, would you go ahead and introduce yourself for everyone?
Absolutely, Skyler. Thank you so much for having me today. Again, Andrew Van Alstyne. I'm located out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I help clients nationally, though. My firm, I'm with a registered investment advisor. So we're fee-based. Our home office is out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. The practice that I'm running is a multifamily office practice. So it's something where we take care of pretty much anything that touches finances for our clients, from budgeting to estate planning, tax preparing, and obviously investment and management as well.
Awesome. And financial underpreparedness, sorry, I'm going to have to remember that specification, but financial underpreparedness is something that a lot of people face. What led you to want to help people to avoid this?
Absolutely. So for me, it's something that really stemmed from a personal issue growing up, where both set of grandparents on both my mother's and father's side, they were doing what the American dream was, which was work hard, save more than you spend, and everything else will just kind of fall into place. And for the most part, it was. They had great lives, they had great careers, they had great success. But later in life, due to poor financial planning, when their health started to deteriorate, obviously that sucked a lot of the financial resources that they had out of it. And not that at the end of the day, that's everything, but when it's something that someone worked so hard to have that accomplishment in life just sucked away from them, it's something that left a mark. And it's always something that I look to help other people not be faced with that situation, both for themselves or their family.
That makes sense. Yeah. And for those who maybe are approaching that stage where they're underprepared, how does that feel as someone who, like, you were a grandchild at the time, so maybe you didn't have a lot of feelings that maybe your parents would have had about the situation, but how does that feel as someone who's dealing with the financial underpreparedness of maybe a loved one who's getting older and things like that?
Yeah. So, we were fortunate where a lot of the work ethics and a lot of the general beliefs that they had were passed on to my parents. So as far as needing any of those resources that they had, neither of my parents nor their siblings were necessarily in need of those financial assets that they had. But it's something where you see your parents' entire life that they work so hard to build up this financial asset just kind of get ripped away from them. It was demoralizing for a little bit. It's something that left a scar on the family, and it left a lot of questions as far as why, how, and what do we do now? So it comes back to a lot of the concerns that people face with all financial issues, where you're kind of left floating out at sea and really have no sense of direction. And you just want to know that you're doing the right thing at the end of the day. And sometimes it just takes a little nudge or push to head there.
Awesome. I love that. And I love that diving in a little deeper to how it would feel as the people who are maybe facing the impact aftermath. Mm-hmm. But awesome. I recently listened to Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. It's a pretty popular book in the financial space, but he talks about how family can benefit from using the money now instead of just waiting to pass it on and making sure that you're enjoying the money now. What do you think of people spending the money now instead of waiting just to pass it on to family members?
Yeah, so there's a couple different components to that. So obviously, first off, it stems from how much assets we're talking about and what tier you are as far as your net worth goes. If we're talking ultra high net worth, then it's a little bit different conversation where, yes, you want to have those experiential interactions with family members now that obviously come at a cost. You don't want to spend too liberally. You don't want to just spend money for the sake of saying that I used it while I was here. The one thing that I talk to a lot of higher net worth individuals about, though, is looking as far as transferring assets while they're still alive. And it's twofold in that capacity, where if you offer family loans. So obviously with any investor, as you get up in age, you usually want to take a little bit lower risk approach with how you're investing your assets. And if you're doing a family loan with the applicable federal rate being lower than what most people can get for a business loan or for a personal loan, it's something where that person, that patriarch or matriarch of the family that has that large asset, can then transfer those assets to the next generation. They can still get a rate of return on their money and let that next generation start to obtain more of those assets where they can then take more riskier ventures. They can invest it in something that's more geared towards their age bracket. And it's also something where it makes sense to also look at philanthropic ventures as well, where it's something where especially for high net worth individuals and high net worth families, it's a great opportunity to share in philosophical ideologies as far as what you're looking to accomplish, how you're looking to be good stewards of the money. And it's really creating those bonding relationships between multiple generations within a family. So it's not necessarily that you're spending the money just for the sake of spending it, but you're utilizing it as a tool to share philosophies, mentalities, and make sure that it's something that lasts 3, 4, 5, 6 generations.
Awesome. And that making sure it lasts part, that's the thing that I hear so often, where millionaires, their wealth's usually gone by like the second or third generation sort of thing. So if you can get ahead of it a little bit, and I think maybe that stems from people don't know how much money's coming, and people don't know, they obviously don't know when it's coming. Someone's going to die eventually, and then that money is just going to balloon to a bunch of people. But that can be really intimidating. So that's where conversations come in. And that's really what we want to talk about today, is how conversations help get ahead of this financial underpreparedness. But when it comes to those high net worth individuals, how can talking about it ahead of time help them and help everyone in the family financially?
Talking is really everything when it comes to high net worth individuals and high net worth families. Oftentimes, if you get into sometimes the second, but definitely by the third and fourth generation, it's something that they oftentimes don't understand the work that went into accumulating this asset. They don't understand the hardships that were faced with building up this level of net worth. So it's something we're having those conversations where they understand the struggles that went in. They understand the hard work that went into that. They then get a better appreciation for what that actually means. It's not just a dollar amount that they're just looking to spend on anything that their heart desires. It actually then ties into the person that created this asset for the family. It's something that, and I touched on this briefly earlier, the more that they converse about money matters, and even just family matters in general, the better understanding they'll have of the philosophies that the family embraces, so that when the transfer of net worth does occur, second, third, fourth generation, it then won't be a burden, because they're not then strapped with trying to figure out, A, where do I put all this money? And B, what does it really mean? What am I supposed to be doing with this? If you have those conversations beforehand, it's a much more smoother transition.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. The conversations help smooth it out. And we're talking a little bit right now about people with high wealth, and I think that's something that people definitely need to consider. But as we get into this a little further, I want to talk about maybe people who have financial struggles. So maybe there's someone listening who's like, oh yeah, that's great for people who have hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever, but we'll get to that in just a moment. But I also want to talk about, what is there to lose if you don't talk about money when it comes to wealth? Like what's up for stakes?
Is losing it all. There's every society has a saying on it, but the most famous one is Chinese it's called shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves proverb, where one generation works hard to accumulate all this wealth. And then by the time you get to the third generation, it's all squandered. And then you're just back to working class, middle class, maybe if you're fortunate to stay upper middle class. But again, it's because those conversations don't take place. So it as quickly as you can grow a family asset when it comes to finances, you can squander it just as quickly, if not quicker. So it's extremely important to have these conversations just because another saying, and I probably rely on them a little bit too heavily, but easy come, easy go. It's something where as much work went in to accumulating that wealth in a short period of time, it can dissipate just as quickly.
Yeah. And how do people bring this conversation up? Because I'm imagining this in my mind. Maybe you're the child or grandchild. So maybe you're the grandchild that doesn't want to lose the wealth that your grandparents have. Like you know they're well off and they're doing well for themselves. How do you bring that up? Because that can be a little awkward where it's like, I don't have a lot of money and I guess I'm looking forward to your money when you really think about it in a sense. But how do you bring that up and start that conversation to say, hey, how do we plan this down properly so that it's not going to get just destroyed once it starts moving around?
Yeah, so I would say that in that circumstance, I think a lot of the responsibility does fall on the more senior members of the family to start having those conversations. There does need to be a level of family governance. And again, I know a lot of this conversation ends with ultra high net worth individuals, but even with the mass affluent, this is something that's becoming more applicable day to day. But it is something where they should take the lead. It shouldn't be a conversation that they feel uncomfortable having. Or, and again, I'm a little biased on this one, but if you have a financial advisor, someone that's in a trusted circle in the financial world, talk to them as far as having those conversations. One thing that I offer for my clients is, having a younger generation summit where they learn proper handling of money at a younger age.
That's cool.
So it is something where getting those people involved at a younger age in finances and financial discussions and feeling more comfortable themselves. Skyler, to use what you were saying, though, if it is something where the younger generation is the one that's having to start this conversation, I would even start with saying, how did this happen? How did you accumulate this wealth? What did you do?
Seek understanding, yeah.
Yeah. Seek to understand and then be understood. I mean, that's the heart of just about everything that I do, and I think that it's applicable in a lot of aspects of life. And I think when you're talking about a younger generation seeking to understand how we got to where we are today, that's the best way, is just looking at and getting them to explain the pathway that they took to accomplish what they have in life.
Yeah, because like you said, that's why this third and fourth generation often lose the money, is because they don't understand the sacrifice it took to gain it. But also, one thing I took from your conversation is if someone's in their early 20s and they just rush straight to their grandparents and throw this conversation down on them, it's going to be awkward quick. It's going to be uncomfortable quick. And maybe you get yourself wrote out of the will. Maybe not that far. Hopefully not that far.
Well,
but
these are definitely things that even once you establish a baseline of where we were and where we are, these are ongoing conversations. These aren't one-time events. These aren't things that are short snippets in time. These are frequent check-ins, family meetings, making sure that everyone stays on the same page. And not everyone in the family needs to do the same thing that the senior member of the family did to accumulate this wealth. In fact, just the opposite. You want to diversify. Just like when you're investing and you want to diversify your assets, same thing goes with family labor and what the family's able to do as far as outputs. You want someone that has strong business acumen. You may want somebody who has more of an inclination to get into medical fields or practices, but you want to spread out what your family is able to do. Obviously, working is still important. You may not necessarily need it, but it is something that's important to have a purpose in life and to continue to accumulate knowledge. When you have the financial assets, the most important thing becomes knowledge.
Yeah. And if you can prepare yourself with those regular conversations, then when you said have the meetings regularly, I'm thinking about what are key events where financial stuff's taking place. Let's think maybe after COVID, the house value went up a lot. So you need to talk about, hey, what are we going to do with this house that's now a large chunk of our parents' net worth? Things like that. Like think of those moments where, hey, this would be a good opportunity to check in, and then keep the conversation going, take some notes so that people don't feel like people are making things up and stuff like that, because they can get tense really quick when you're talking about maybe each person's going to get $1 million, and you obviously want to be careful of that. So And I love your idea of getting a mediator in terms of a financial advisor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is something that you should have a close network of various professionals, whether from finance to legal. But again, as far as the family meetings, it is something where you should get all generations together at least once a year. You should, obviously, if you're having outside professionals, they can assist with this, but you should have a family member that almost operates as secretary and takes family meeting notes. This way you can refer back to those on an annual basis to see where you've come from. Back to what we were talking about earlier, as far as having those conversations that can be tricky. If you have an entire book of every meeting that the family had and the discussions that took place and what you're looking to accomplish as a family, and you have notes that can be referenced by every generation for generations that haven't even been born yet, it's something that will help with those conversations as well. But ideally, you want to have it around conversations that if you're establishing either different family trusts and you're looking to do distributions from that, you should have those conversations and that family meeting around the time of year that you're looking to do those. So somewhere between when taxes are being done for the family as well as when distributions are being done. So if you can kind of time it in between those and thread the needle on those times, that would work ideal.
Awesome. That's a very helpful hint for people to take away from this. But let's turn a little bit now to the people who maybe are listening to this and saying, yeah, but not everyone has that kind of wealth and things like that. And let's say maybe they have financial difficulties. They have a hard time, a difficult financial history, and that's leading to tension. How do people overcome the difficult history in their family with money in order to talk about it more?
The point is to not approach money conversations like it's a dirty topic. I think we can probably speak for hours on end as far as how we've gotten here as a society. I don't think that there's any singular root cause. There's a lot of issues at play as far as why we've gotten here. But especially with loved ones, it's important to open up and be very candid as far as money. And it doesn't necessarily need to be about income or expenses, just asking the why. Why do you look at money this way? How do you approach money? When it's family, I get it. It can be hard. The first conversations for anything great usually are hard. But it's important to know what the long-term goal is and what you're looking to achieve at the end, which is peace of mind for yourself, for your loved ones, for their loved ones. And it's important to start the conversation. You don't need to be complex. You start simple. Carl Richards, another gentleman that I listen to that operates a lot in behavioral finance. The one conversation that he starts with everyone is just even asking what their first memory of money is.
That's a great one.
Some people remember something, when they're 4 or 5 years old that their parents didn't have an impact on life. Other people, it was the first time they go away to a camp and some kid tried to take money out of someone else's lockbox. So everyone has a different understanding of money. But that first memory, that core memory, actually says a lot about how they look at finances and how they treat finances in their young adult, and older adult life.
Yeah, and that first memory that, like you brought that up, and I started to think a story I often tell is that going into the gas station with a $20 bill and not necessarily always filling up the gas tank. And for me, that left an impression of I always want to have enough money to fill up the gas tank. Like that's my baseline. I don't want to be below that. And then another one that came to mind is when I went to Disneyland for the first time as a kid, I saved up all my chore money and then when I got there, I bought one big thing instead of a bunch of little things. So like that's a fantastic question to ask yourself. And it'll probably be one of the main talking points from today's episode is, what was your first money memory? I love that. That's a fantastic conversation starter. But how can it be beneficial to talk about money as a family, even if there isn't the millions of dollars of wealth to pass on? If it's just, hey, I need help getting out of credit card debt and that sort of stuff, how can that even be beneficial for families?
Yeah, because it's all in understanding that why again. It's seeking to understand where they are. So, someone needs help with managing debt in the family, or someone needs assistance, or you're in a position now where now you can offer that assistance. If you're just throwing the money at an underlying concern, you're never going to solve the problem. So if you're helping someone out with debt or someone needs help with debt, just the transfer of assets in that capacity isn't solving anything other than taking care of the debt. A quick Band-Aid. Yeah. Yeah. It's a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. If you're actually having a discussion as far as how did we get here? What caused this? What are we going to do to remediate this going forward? why did this happen? The initial knee-jerk reaction that a lot of individuals in that situation have is, well, I don't make enough and I can't make enough. Mm-hmm. Well, there's always ways around that. And again, some involve more sacrifices than others. But even when you're talking about those ultra high net worth families, someone along the line made a sacrifice.
Yes.
So are you willing to make that sacrifice to get to where you want to be? No? Okay, then we need to cut expenses. Or it's something where, do we consolidate our resources down? Do you live under my roof for 6 months while you figure it out? Do we carpool into work and switch cars every day so that we're not putting the wear and tear on our vehicles, or we can only go down to one car, or whatever the case may be? But it's having the conversation as far as how did we get here, and then putting everything on the table as far as options until we figure out what we actually need to do going forward and what makes sense for all parties.
Yeah, I like the idea of having the conversation of how did we get here, because that's fantastic. Because like we were saying, if maybe you're the one sibling in the family that has a good amount of money and you're well off, and you could just pay it off or give a good chunk to pay it down, but you're going to be very frustrated when it's 8 years down the road and they're in a worse off financial situation because they didn't really learn. So that can be really tricky to bring up. But how do you be someone who, let's say you're the person with the money that could help and you know how to handle money and things like that? How do you be the person to ease into that conversation and make it helpful and maybe not judgmental?
So something in that situation, especially if and a lot of this conversation right now is revolving around managing debt, because that seems to be the underlying issue with a lot of people that fall below the mass affluent level. And even with those individuals, that's something where that family loan rate can come in handy, because you can ease the burden as far as what they're having to pay to service that debt from personal, consumer, whatever type of debt it may be. You can offer a much lower interest rate for that. And then what you're almost doing is, it's having those frequent meetings as far as, okay, how are we paying this down now? What are we doing next? What's the next steps to make sure that we're not falling back on these bad habits? Hey, by the way, since we now have this established, why don't we put those credit cards in the back of the safe for 6 months and just pretend they don't exist so that we can get back on solid footing, learn how to live within our means? I actually had this conversation with someone this week and a different person last week, but there's many people that are our age that you ask them to even balance a checkbook. First off, you're lucky if they know what you're talking about. Secondly, a majority of them can't. People don't know how to make sure that their expenses don't exceed their income by just doing simple addition and subtraction. So it's slowing people down to get to that stage. That's honestly, in this conversation, would be in an ideal place to start once you get over that why.
Yeah. And I often start, even before budgeting, is tracking your expenses. Like you said, you got to know, hey, what's that? Am I actually living below my means? Things like that. And I think maybe we need to invent a new term, because I think people hear checkbook and they think many, many years ago. So they think, oh, balancing my checkbook isn't a thing I have to do anymore, but it's a principle. Like it's a core idea that you have to do. You have to make sure you can say, here's what I made, here's what I spent. Does that equal out? Are you keeping track of it somewhere else? Does the bank line up? Like, do your numbers match? Things like that. Like, you got to double check that sort of stuff, whether it's in a checkbook or a spreadsheet.
It's a lot like when you're learning math in school. You learn how to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division before you ever introduce a calculator. The same applies with finances. You need to learn how to make sure you're getting the numbers to balance out manually before you introduce technology that can take over that system for you.
Yes. Yeah. That's fantastic. I like that. We got all the way back from high net worth individuals down to people who you need to learn the foundational things and how to balance a checkbook or balance a spreadsheet or whatever it might be. I had one more question come to mind of how do you avoid the feeling like you're being a bank to your family? Because that's what came to my mind, that when you're doing these family loans and things like that, it's like, oh, you're becoming family bank co or something like that. How do you avoid those feelings?
I wouldn't necessarily even say that it's a feeling that you would need to run away from. The transfer of asset is going to take place at some point. Whether they're siblings, whether they're the children, whether they're the grandchildren, there's a high probability that the transfer of asset is going to take place at some point. Oftentimes, you're able to have these family loans at a lower rate than any tax burden that they're going to have from having a transfer of assets in your passing. So and again, this gets back to even what I was saying earlier, where especially if you are that older generation or that more senior individual, you want to become less risky with your investments anyway. So as long as you pass on that philosophy, then transfer those assets through that loan, they're paying you back at a lower rate. If they're younger, they can then take a more risky investment, whether that is in the market, in themselves, whatever it is, but it is a higher risk venture that they are then utilizing that money for, that is then going to net a greater return. So it's having the understanding that the transfer is going to take place. We're just staying ahead of the curve so I can be here and help steward and shepherd and answer any questions or help you overcome any hurdles to the best of my ability while I am still walking this earth.
Yeah.
And it's just laying that groundwork. So taking the standpoint of almost being a family bank, I definitely wouldn't run away from it, and I probably wouldn't even shy away from it. I would want to lean into it and say that, yes, this is where we are, and this is how we're going to approach this going forward as a family. I wouldn't use it as leverage against other family members, but it's simply having the understanding that this is how I can best serve you and best help you moving forward.
Yeah, and I think the initial concern stems from so many horror stories, I guess, of family loaning out money and things like that. But I guess you're able to kind of coach through and talk through at those meetings to a level of maturity where you're able to be able to comfortably manage money together as a family. So it really all stems back to having conversations early, have conversations before you make the loan. That way you can coach, you can help educate, things like that. Make sure stuff's in place before you're saying, here's $500,000 at 1% or whatever the terms might be. That because if you just throw that on them, now you're really worried about what they're going to do with it, things like that. So
the one thing
get ahead of it with conversations.
The one thing I would mention too is that before issuing this loan is actually have them write up a detailed, almost business plan as far as how this money is going to be utilized. Make them actually show that there's at least a intellectual proof of concept so that this money is being utilized. And this goes for any age as far as this transfer taking place, whether it is another adult or an adolescent child that is using this for a family philanthropic venture that they want to potentially start initiating a grant or whatever it is. Have them actually write up a plan that is almost as if you're going to a bank with a business plan looking for this loan as well. So it's something where you're not just throwing money hand over fist at problems that don't need to be solved with finance, with cash. Make them actually articulate how this money is going to be put to best use to best serve not only them, but the family.
Yeah. And I can speak highly to how that helps out because when my wife and I got married, we didn't have this big, super expensive wedding, but we wanted some financial help. And we wrote out everything like, hey, here's our costs. And then I went to my grandma and said, hey, I'm looking to ask for some money for help with our wedding, but here is the breakdown of how we're planning to spend it. And she's like, sure, you didn't need to show me that. Like, you're my grandkid. I would have gave you the money. It wasn't a big number, but like, it was very helpful to say, hey, here's what we're planning to do. And I almost think it made her more confident to just write the check immediately sort of thing. So that helps in a big way. So I really like that. 2 final questions to wrap us up here. First, we'll talk about how people can get in contact with you. And then second, to let you think about it, is what do you wish you would have known sooner when it comes to money? But we'll wrap up with that one. But first, how can people get in touch with you?
So I'm on most major social media. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Andrew Van Alstyne. If you search me on all of those, there's only one other gentleman with my name in the country that has any media presence. So I should be pretty easy to find on there. My firm is Fiduciary Financial Advisors. So for fiduciary.com, if you go there, meet the team, Andrew Van Alstyne, as of right now, top center in the top 3, just alphabetically.
Awesome.
That's the best way to find me.
Fantastic. And then Andrew, what do you wish you would have known sooner when it comes to money?
Much of what we even talked about today is that it's okay to talk about money. It doesn't need to be a scary conversation. It doesn't need to be something that we shy away from. We should actually lean in and be more opening as individuals, as families, as a society to discussing financial matters with one another.
Fantastic. So it's easier than you think it is. It's better than you think it is. And go ahead and get started talking about money with your family. Andrew, thank you so much for joining. This was a really fantastic conversation.
Thank you, Skyler.
Thank you so much to Andrew for coming on today's episode and that great interview. There's a lot of things that could impact you, but a couple that I want to talk about real quick are how important family conversations are when it comes to preserving wealth. You need to make sure you understand the strategies to initiate and navigate these discussions. I made sure to ask the question of how does maybe a grandchild or someone else like that bring up the financial conversation, because I know a lot of my listeners are in a younger demographic and maybe you're learning more about money and you want to bring up conversations to help your family do better with money. So make sure you know how to bring it up. That's something that's going to be very important and something that's going to help a lot when it comes to bringing up these conversations and having them in a healthy manner. I hope you are also able to take away the importance of actually having these conversations and avoiding maybe the really difficult financial situation where nobody is aware of what's going on with the finances and nobody wants to talk about it. So make sure you consider the impact that today's interview could have on you. But let's talk about the money talking points next. The first money talking point is, what is your first money memory? One of my first money memories, and I've shared it on this podcast before, is that often my parents would send me in with just a $20 bill to put whatever they could in the gas tank. And sure, gas was cheaper back then, but I tend to notice the gas tank was never really filled. And that left a mark on me that I wanted to always make sure to have savings to make sure I could fill up a gas tank whenever I needed to get somewhere. Or that I always wanted to make sure to have money to be able to get wherever I needed to go. So what's your first money memory? This would be a great one to leave on a social media comment. So please share with me. I'd love to hear what you think is the first time you recollect something with money, because it's often an interesting starting point for your financial journey. And you can often tie back quite a few things that you do with money to that initial starting point. The second money talking point is, what are the benefits of transferring wealth to younger generations before passing? And this comes right on the heels of me finishing listening to Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. In that book, he talks a lot about passing your money on before you actually die and enjoying the money now, because if you're waiting till you're 80, 90 and you die to pass money on, it's likely your children are going to be in their 50s and 60s and already through the hard financial times that your money could have really helped them get through. So think about when you were in your 20s and 30s and maybe you needed a little bit extra money for a down payment, or you needed a little bit of money to float maybe 2 or 3 months rent because you just had a kid, things like that. Think about the benefits of transferring the money you've accumulated as you get older to younger generations in your family before you pass away. And if this gets some thoughts stirring in your mind, go listen to or borrow or buy the book Die with Zero. It can really help transfer your mindset around some of the ways we think about money, and it can change it up for the better. The third money talking point is, how can families overcome the tension of discussing money, especially with difficult financial histories? I think this is going to be a fun one for you to have a conversation with a friend or a coworker. You can ask them, hey, I think, how do you even start a financial conversation with your family? Because money can tend to be one of those topics that you don't talk about around the dinner table. So how do you even start the conversation? Do you bring up a financial struggle? Do you bring up a financial win? Maybe you don't want to bring up a struggle because you're maybe a little ashamed or you're afraid you're going to get judged by your family. But you also don't want to bring up a success story because then maybe you're going to be looked at as boastful or bragging or things like that. And you want to avoid that as well. So that can be something that's hard to bring up. This would be a great discussion as well to have on social media. So let me know, how do you think families can overcome the tension of discussing money, especially when there's maybe a difficult financial past? Next, let's talk about the Money Talk Mastery. So in today's Money Talk Mastery segment, I want to explore the concept of a family loan rate, as Andrew called it in today's episode. And what is this? The family loan rate is a concept where family members loan out money to each other, and it's upon agreed upon terms, lower rates, lower interest rates, and it can allow you to get ahead. It can allow you to get ahead without the other family member feeling like they're going to lose all their money, and maybe they'll make a little bit back because of a very small interest rate, but it's much cheaper money than going and borrowing from a bank or a payday lender or things like that. This family loan rate system can provide financial support within the family without creating dependencies or feelings of entitlement. It can also help facilitate that transfer of wealth while keeping money in the family unit instead of passing it out to some bank or payday lender or things like that. This family loan rate can be particularly beneficial for young family members who might struggle to secure loans because of no credit, or they might be trying to get essentially screwed over with a high interest rate when a family member has the kind of money to be able to loan it at a low rate. They trust their family member, and if they don't get the money back, it'll be okay. I'm certainly not a huge advocate of loans among family members, but it's something that could be considered. It's an idea that's worth talking about and trying. and key emphasis on talking about it. Make sure that everyone's aware of what's going to happen. And also, if you are the one loaning money, there should maybe be a little bit of thought in your mind about what if this doesn't get paid back, because maybe there's not a real collections process, or you don't want to send your grandchild to a collections agency over a family loan, something like that. That sounds a little bit silly, but be aware of some of the consequences that this could have. And it's essential to establish clear repayment terms and expectations to avoid a misunderstanding or potential conflicts in the future. This family loan rate can also be something that's a great tool to teach about how loans work, how interest works, and things like that, because often I think young adults get into student loans, credit card debt without actually understanding how interest even works. So a low family rate can start to get that thought process going and help money move to the younger members who need it a little bit more. So it's definitely something to consider. So make sure, if you're interested in it, reach out to me. I'd love to have a conversation with it. If this is something you want to walk through on the podcast, I'd be happy to have you on. Or go and look up family loan rate, look up family loans, how to properly structure it and things like that. Ask around. Let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to dive into this topic a little bit deeper and help anyone who is maybe looking in towards lending to their family or asking to borrow money from their family. This is something that can be really a big deal, but I could see it having a huge helping hand for younger members trying to get ahead. Maybe they don't have credit and things like that. So that's today's Money Talk Mastery, the family loan rate. It's something that I heard that I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into. But let's wrap up today's episode next. Thank you for sticking around to the end. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Having open family conversations, it's absolutely essential so that we can avoid financial underpreparedness. It aids in that smooth transfer of wealth between older generations and younger generations, which I think needs to happen earlier and earlier. Think about being someone who is wealthy and you're getting super old or something like that, and you see your grandkids struggling financially. Think about the happiness that you can enjoy now, being able to pass on some of that money, as opposed to when you're dead and you won't really be able to fully enjoy it in this life because you're gone. So consider thinking about passing on money earlier and really talk about it with your family. Have regular meetings like we talked about in our interview. Have regular meetings. Have someone who's kind of a secretary to keep track of that so that the family later down the road knows how hard everyone worked to manage the money together. But one thing I wanted to mention is I have a new website, which is super exciting. It's moneytalkwithskylerfleming.com. And of course you can find it in the show notes, but it's just the name of this podcast.com. And it's brand new. Brand completely new. It's not just a new domain, things like that. So please go and check it out. Let me know what you think. There's a lot of forms on there that you can contact me really quickly. So if you want to get in touch, head over to moneytalkwithskylerfleming.com/contact and let me know what you think about today's episode. But thank you for joining us for this insightful discussion with Andrew, and I hope it encourages more open and productive financial conversations with your family. But thank you for listening to Money Talk with Skyler Fleming. I'm your host, Skyler Fleming. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Money Talk with Skyler Fleming. This show is provided for informational and entertainment purposes and may not be specific to your unique situation. Please be sure to do additional research before making any financial decisions.